You can go.
Right, Lewis, are you ready?
I'm ready. Okay. Go ready.
Media censorship. Do we need it? Our documentary asked the question, is media censorship a necessity or is it a hindrance? Now it's going to be a short 10-minute documentary that's going to be a student project as part of a BTEC media project. It's going to be an expository documentary, and we consider it to be a beginner's insight into the topic of media censorship, an unbiased and impartial look into media censorship.
If our documentary was going to be full length, it would be 90 minutes in length, and we'll cover more strands and go into more detail. It would be shown on BBC One on a Saturday, and because we feel that will get the best viewing figures.
Now, SWOT analysis. The strengths we have is that it's a topic with many strands. There's loads of different angles we can come at the topic of media censorship from, the ethical stand, the creative stand. Also, it's a topic with a lot of pre-existing information, so it's very easy to do secondary research. And also, it's a very topical subject we feel at the moment, with news of the world scandal, the the old Australian hoax DJ call Everson inquiry.
And now on to the weaknesses. We think that we're coming to some legal and ethical difficulties, particularly because people have different opinions on the topics, and that's to do with the ethics and legal reasons, because obviously the censorship is government controlled and they make all the laws for it, like companies like Ofcom, so that will cause problems. Also, we think it's going to be hard to condense the topic into 10 minutes, as there's so many different strands we've got to cover, from the Leveson inquiry to why censorship is important. Also, we feel that it's hard to conduct vox pops on this topic, so we've decided to use sound bites from interviews instead.
Opportunities we have are to make a balanced documentary about media censorship. The issue of impartiality and balance is a major selling point in our documentary. As most previous documentaries on media censorship, at least the ones we've watched, have been incredibly biased against censorship. For example, Dear Censor, a film about film censorship, was completely anti-censorship for an hour, had one spokesperson pro-censorship, that was Mary Winehouse. That's the person you'd want, if you wanted a pro-censorship person. Still, there's only one. Also, we try to attract a younger audience in our documentary. Our secondary audience is a younger audience, which we feel most documentaries on media censorship haven't gone for. And also, we consider some more general overview on media censorship. For example, the documentary I mentioned earlier, Dear Censor, is very much specifically about film censorship. Other documentaries like Project Censor, specifically about press censorship. We try and cover a multitude of strands in this documentary. However,
some of the threats that we've come up with is, obviously there are a lot of documentaries already on the topic of censorship, and we feel that it's going to be hard to be original and try and take a fresh approach on censorship. We also feel that experts may decline our interviews from like Ofcom or the North Korean government, because we are only A-level students and we're not professional documentary makers. Another threat we came up with is that previous ratings for documentaries have been quite low and not as many people watch them, and that could be because they're not as interested in it.
While the figures of documentaries at the moment in general might look positive, for example, an airing of the new David Attenborough series Africa on the 13th of January attracted just over 7.5 million viewers. Audience figures for documentaries on media censorship haven't been as high. For example, Dear Censor, documentary I mentioned earlier, it got ratings of less than 239,000, and the recent documentary Hugh Grant taken on in the tabloids got less than 1.5 million viewers. So that's a threat for us, as audiences aren't high for documentaries on media censorship.
This is why our documentaries are going to be different and why it's going to stand out. Number one, we're going to try and present a very balanced argument which is going to be unbiased and impartial, and we're going to do this by looking at the positives of censorship and the negatives, and we're going to let our audience decide for themselves. Another advantage of our documentary is we're going to try and attract a younger audience, as we feel this is very relevant because young people consume a lot of media nowadays, and that's going to be our secondary audience. Also, we're going to try and have a more general overview of media censorship and try and go into as much detail as possible.
We feel this subject is very relevant to today and the times we're living in, which is a selling point we'll use to attract a younger audience. For example, when we talk about the pros and cons of media censorship, we'll illustrate them with an example of media censorship from real life, and we're going to try and use some of the things that have been very much dominating the news recently. And furthermore, while documentaries on media censorship haven't been proved to be very popular, we do feel this topic is very popular. For example, News of the World, which we talk about in our documentary, when the phone hacking scandal, when that all came to fruition, that was all in the news. The last paper, that sold 3.8 million copies, which is 1 million more copies than the News of the World would usually sell on a regular day. And furthermore, the News at 10 ratings, they came into just over 5 million the week in July, in the month of July, when the Leveson inquiry and all of media censorship was very much in the press. So we do feel that although documentaries on media censorship haven't gained a large audience, the topic is very popular, and we hope our documentary will be different and stand out, and so therefore can grab that audience.
With regards to our primary target audience, we're going to try and target reformers, and we're going to target sort of an older audience, sort of middle ages 40 and upwards, because we feel that they will have a better understanding of censorship, and they've been around at some of the key times when censorship has been used, particularly maybe in like the Falklands Wars, and obviously nowadays we've got like the Iraq War, which is very relevant. They will also be a social class of A to C, and we think this is relevant as they're like a skilled working class. They hold high positions in society, and they will know quite a bit about it. We also feel that our primary audience would be a British audience, as we're particularly focusing on censorship within the UK. Again, our target audience will have no specific religion in order to generate a mass audience.
Now, a secondary target audience, we're trying to go for the young demographic, again reformist, and we're hoping probably the D2E class, maybe sort of students, and the way we're going to try and attract this audience is by again illustrating the points we make with more contemporary examples of media censorship. We're also going to actually feature young people in our documentary by way of interviews, and we'll make young people making it. So we feel that they'll feel more attracted to it than other documentaries, perhaps on media censorship. Again, no specific ethnicity or religion, no specific nationality. Our
structure of our documentary is going to be like chronological. We're going to have a beginning where we sort of generally talk about what censorship is and who censors, and then in the middle we're going to talk about the pros and cons and try and start to build a balanced argument of the positives and negatives of censorship, then at the end of it we will try and draw to a close this balanced argument and let our audience decide for themselves.
Alright, now the main body of our documentary is where we're going to try and bring the pros and cons of media censorship. And we're going to try to include as many pros about media censorship as we do cons. So, firstly, the pros of media censorship, we're going to cover in 4 chapters. Of course, each section here will be a chapter, each bullet point here will be a chapter. There will be whether media censorship could ever stop radical or politically incorrect ideas, whether media censorship could protect national security, whether media censorship could protect people from media witch hunts, or whether media censorship could protect the easily influenced.
And now on to the cons. We feel that censorship could compromise freedom of speech and freedom of the press. We also feel that media censorship could limit entertainment and creativity, like books, certain television like wrestling. We also feel that censorship can help a dictatorship stay in power, and it can stop government propaganda. We also feel that media censorship could distort people's views on public events and change their whole opinion.
And each of these chapters will consist of interviews, archive footage, voiceovers, and on-screen graphics. And again, the conclusion, as my colleague mentioned earlier, we're going to leave open. So hopefully in the introduction, we educate the audience so that everyone coming to the documentary can view the pros and cons from a more educated standpoint. Then we're going to present them with the pros and cons, and then simply leave the audience to decide for themselves what I think about it.
This is our primary research. Over the course of the last few weeks, we conducted the primary research by conducting interviews with a range of different people, from teachers to students, media students who know about the topic, and we've learned quite a lot from it. Lewis, do you want to get up the clip?
Here's a test footage interview, some of the test footage interviews that we did.
Who censors?
Yeah.
Oh, I think everyone censors. I think individuals censor what they say. So they might want to say something, but they won't. They kind of hold back from saying exactly what they want to say. I think that broadcasters censor what they produce. They decide what they want everyone else to see or not. I think governments censor. I think everyone has a certain level of censorship.
I think that obviously if film is something to children, where I see what they show, and you see it being appropriate, which can affect them. However, in the media in terms of like newspapers and stuff and politics, I think it can be bad because it can totally change things opinions, which is not what you want.
Probably decide the opinion of the country with the video.
Now what we learned from these test footage interviews was that firstly we should always use a directional mic, so we exclusively pick up the sound mostly from the interviewee. Also we learned we should send the interviewee questions beforehand, We're not saying that the interviewees gave bad answers, but we feel that they didn't have time to prepare for such a big topic such as media censorship, so the answers probably weren't as thought out as they probably would have been if we sent the questions beforehand. We interviewed Mr. Bradshaw, we sent him the questions beforehand, and he was able to sort of do some research about media censorship before the interview. We also learned we should interview students as well as teachers. When we were going to conduct the interviews, we thought we'd just interview Tom. You know, he's a geezer. We thought he'll be a good person to interview. However, when we were there, the other group were also conducting interviews. So we decided, and they're interviewing a student. So we thought, well, why not? He's there, so we'll try and interview him. And we got a really good interview. And so we decided, yeah, students, especially students, will also be good people to interview as well as teachers. Also employ the rule of 2/3. We used it at first in the in-studio interviews, and when we went on location to see the interview with Tom Warner, we sort of positioned him centre of the screen, and we don't really feel that was as effective or looked as professional as when we used the rule of 2/3. And we also learned that we should use more general open questions if we want to get more general philosophical answers, which of course is useful in a 10-minute documentary that's meant to cover such a big topic. We want, you know, answers that you could take and you could apply that to many different forms of censorship, many different examples of censorship. However, closed questions are really good when you actually want the interview response to directly relate to the closed questions are really good if you want the interviewee's response to directly relate to the piece of archive footage and video that precedes it or succeeds it. Or of course if you want a soundbite, like the last interview Tom Warner gave, we asked a closed question, how much can the media censorship influence people's opinions? And we got a very good soundbite out of that, which we'll use in the documentary.
Some of the interviews questions we asked, we've got two categories, more general questions and more specific questions. We asked general questions like, what is media censorship, to get a general consensus so we know what the general public think it is. We also asked, has the media affected any opinions you hold and what ones, to see how powerful like the media is and how censorship can change people's opinions. We also asked questions like, do you think media censorship has ever been harmful or bad, and when? And that's to see, like, to get a general consensus of the negative impacts on censorship.
And some of the more specific closed questions that we asked were, how much of an effect, you know, the media has on people? How can media censorship, you know, benefit national security, and how can media censorship compromise freedom of speech? And the good thing about putting sort of the title of the chapter in the question is that you definitely know where to place the question in the edit. Some of the more general open questions, they could go in multiple chapters, which is good, but also sometimes, you know, you definitely want to be assured you have some interviews to put in a chapter.
Now on to our secondary research. We compiled a lot of secondary research over the last few weeks from different websites, different books and some documentaries that we've watched on media censorship. We've got this bibliography here where we've, as you can see, we've compiled a list of different websites where we've obtained our information from, and there's different books and things. Lewis, do you want to explain more about this bibliography?
Well, this is simply one slide of the bibliography. The whole thing would, you know, knock you out. It's amazing. But yeah, we tried to, again, our primary audience is the sort of the older, typical demographic that documentaries on media censorship try and go after. So we thought we might as well include some older examples of media censorship. For example, we talk about the birth of a nation, that revival of the KKK. We talk about the Tiananmen Square massacre and how the media in China very much sort of distorted, we feel, the public's opinion on the protesters, and the murder of Victor Jara shortly after the Chilean coup.
We've also got some more contemporary examples like the natural born killers, copycat killings, and we've got the Beijing Olympics. We also have media censorship in North Korea and about the government restrictions on things like the internet and press censorship.
And we've tried to incorporate a range of the contemporary and the older examples of media censorship. Again, as I said, I repeat, to try and get the younger audience as well. Now, who we're going to interview? Some interviews we've already secured, and we feel we've made good progress in filming a majority of these already. Some examples: we've got Peter Hodges, media teacher. We've got John Bradshaw, an English teacher. We've got Chris Walsh, media student. Janine Shelley, history teacher. And we've got a journalist from the Sunday Times, Joe Shapley. And we feel this provides a good range of sort of expertise. We've got history teachers, English teachers, people know about history, people know about media, actual journalists. So we feel that we're going to get a good range of opinions to present an interesting documentary.
Now on to who we still want to interview. We want to interview representatives from places like the North Korean government to get a take on what censorship is like in North Korea. We also want to interview a representative of Ofcom and a representative of Factual, just to get a general overview, as these are experts and they really know about their field, and I think this will be key in our documentary, especially to back up our facts, so it will make our documentary accurate.
However, they don't respond to emails. Now, the location recce. These are some of them. The short look at our location recce. Here's some of the locations we used. We used a broadcast studio for the in-studio sort of interviews. We wanted, a black background, just, all the two-thirds serious kind of, interview. All our interviews are serious and usually all two-thirds. But we thought this gave sort of a good sort of, dramatic feel to it. It's a very close proximity to the equipment and the crew. There's in-studio lighting, so I don't have to carry those around. It's very easy to control sound and easier to control lighting also in the studio as well, which really was a good advantage.
Another location we used was classrooms within Thomas Harris, and we feel that this also provided an advantage because it was like a mix of different sort of scenery within the documentary. So our audience wasn't just looking at one type of environment where we were interviewing our interviewers. We also feel that our interviewee would feel more relaxed in their environment. And also it's harder to control lighting and sound, but it is much better for the interviewee itself.
And also we feel that the classroom gives quite an authoritative sort of look. But when someone's talking in a classroom behind a desk, it sort of gives the appearance they know what they're talking about, which we hope they do. We also went to Oxford Street to try and conduct some Vox Pops, back when we had the idea of conducting Vox Pops. Went to Oxford Street, it's a good waffle stand there, overpriced. But we decided not to conduct Vox Pops. It was cold. I faced enough rejection in my life already without sort of having 20 people do it, in the space of half an hour. So, and also, you never really see Vox Pops in documentaries about topics such as media censorship. We decided to look out of place, and we think that sound bites would be actually more effective than Vox Pops.
Here's a list of our requirements. We've broken it down into two sections: production and post-production requirements. And we feel for our production we need a Canon 550 as it shoots in quality HD with 1280 by 720 pixels. Oh no, it's right. It's 1028. Sorry. We also decided to use a tripod to keep the shot steady and things like a boom hole and a directional mic. We also used a Samsung Zoom, which was where we recorded the sound externally, and we had to try and sync it up, and we feel that this was better because we could keep an eye on the sound levels and we knew exactly how the sound was going to sound.
Our post-production requirements will of course be an Apple MacBook Pro to do the post-production on, and then of course you need software like Final Cut Pro to do most of the editing, After Effects to do some additional on-screen graphics. We need a condenser mic of course to record the voiceovers, and I mean, if this was going to be made to be aired on TV, and it did have funding, we have to pay for an editor. Of course we're editing it ourselves, but we'd use an editor. But it isn't being funded by BBC.
This is an example of one of our storyboards. We've got the shot number, shot type, and we decided to use a photographic storyboard as we feel that our group's drawing skills isn't the best, and it's better to get an idea of how the shot's exactly going to be framed and to get a feel of the location. As you can see, we've got detailed notes on screen action and camera movement, so that when we come to film the actual film, we will know exactly what we're doing, so it will, should go right with few complications.
Now the budget. Again, as I said, we don't have funding, so it's irrelevant really. But if this was to be made, if this was to be made for the BBC, or ITV, whatever, and it was, going to be a 90-minute and full length, we don't think it'd cost that much for a documentary, really. It cost £6,132, 68 pence, not bad. And we think the reason for this is because we're not going to only use a single camera crew system with one camera. We don't feel we need a large shot variation, really. We're also going to not be spending many days in the broadcast studio. And there are other things why the cost, we feel we'd be able to keep it under control. But again, we're not getting funding, so we don't get free paper, we don't get free waffles.
Here's some of the legal and ethical things you've looked at. Basically, to break this out, this is 7.3. It basically says that when someone's invited to do an interview, before they get to the interview, they must be told and be fully aware about what the interview's about, how we're going to use their response, and what sort of questions we're going to ask. We also have to make them aware that the documentary will be shown on YouTube, and we cover this legal and ethical problem by using a release form, which basically gives our interviewee, they sign for their permission to be used on film, and we can use their response to the questions.
These are from the Ofcom broadcasting codes. This rule 3.8 and section 3, and this is about, I think this is about harm and offence. The harm and offence section, and in basic English, this sort of means that we're not allowed to show any videos that might, be likely to incite violence or harm. Which we feel could be limiting to us because our documentary is all about media censorship, and a certain part of our documentary could media censorship limit creativity and entertainment is about when censorship is sort of it's harmed some of the films that might be seen to be more violent, more harmful, like Natural Born Killers. So this law sort of states that we can't show an example of how those films have been censored, what scenes have been cut out, which is a bit of a limitation for us.
Now on to 2.2. This is basically one of the factual issues to do with accuracy, and it states that when using facts and figures, we have to present them accurately, and we can't present false facts and figures that may mislead our audience in any way, or so that they don't come to believe something that is not true.
Of course, we have the issues of copyright in our documentary. We'll be using loads of archive footage. We'll be using songs, you know, that are owned by, you know, production companies, and you know, our footage will be archived by different companies. So, but luckily, we are cleared under the fair use, the 1988 Use of Fair Dealing Copyright Designs and Parents Act in the UK. And we're cleared under one rule, that it's being used for research and private study. However, we're also cleared under the rule that it's being used for criticism and review.
This is our gag shot. This basically gives a breakdown of how long the project's going to take and what areas we're going to focus on. As you can see, we started this project back in late November, and the pre-production is going to be finished mid-February of this year, and then the actual production is going to last just over 4 weeks, so we can film everything and go back and reshoot anything just to get it perfect. As you can see, also with the post-production, it will last just, it would just be nearly 3 weeks, so we can edit everything and get everything spot on. And the project should end at the end of March, on the 31st of March 2013.
It's been a great audience, been great to talk to you.
Thank you for listening. Do you have any questions?
Will you be featuring your documentary, because it seems like you have quite a strong opinions to this topic?
No, we're going to, our voices won't even be, well, I'm going to be doing the voiceover for the voiceovers in this documentary, but I won't be on screen at any time. We're trying to sort of not include our opinions per se on the topic. Of course, when making any documentary, there's obviously going to be some kind of bias, because again, in this sense, it's what we feel are the main major cons and 4 major pros of media censorship, which of course is sort of is a subjective viewpoint, but that's simply because we don't have enough time to cover you know, all of the major pros and cons of media censorship in 10 minutes. So there's some subjectivity in it, but we try to keep that down to a minimum.
Is there any other questions? Okay. If there's no more questions, thanks for listening and taking your time to hear our presentation.
Thank you.